Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Munoz, CEO of the experience agency D Flash. Each week, I bring on a different business leader who's done incredible work. And this week's episode is no different. I am so excited to have Nic Allum, who's a cultural marketing legend. Yes, I'm going to call her a legend because for 30 years, she's been at the intersection of all things that matter when it comes to culture and marketing. We're going to have a great conversation about how she got her start, some of the amazing things she's worked on, what she's doing right now, and what she's up to next. It's going to be a great conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Nic.
Hi, Laura. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on. So even though, we're like a gazillion months into the quarantine, is it 6 months, 8 months, 25 years? I don't even know.
Who knows?
the podcast doesn't change and the first question doesn't change. And so, Nic, what was your first job?
My first job was as a runner at the now iconic Reading Festival in the UK. For those of you who don't know, Reading had been a heavy metal festival for many years in the 70s, and it was taken over in 1989 by a group called the Min Fiddler group. It's now called Festival Republic. And there was the big surge in indie music at the time, and this company took this festival over and turned it into what it is now, which is one of the preeminent global kind of rock, indie and hip hop festivals in the world. It was there and around way before Coachella, before Lollapalooza, all of those. It's one of the kind of granddaddies of the festival scene. And yeah, I started my first job working for them, literally running around, putting gaff tape down, getting coffees for people, you name it. I was one of those junior production assistants.
Awesome. I bet you learned a ton about people and their behavior
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a crash course, not only in major event production and all the different pieces that go into it, but also it was a crash course in talent relationship management, because one of the parts of my job was making sure that the artists performing got onto site on time, that they found their trailers okay, that they had their riders, and they were happy with the experience.
It's interesting, like it continues to always amaze me that I ask this question because I'm just genuinely curious. And what happens in 150 plus podcast episodes, it's always interesting to see how whatever first job my guest mentions as the one that kind of pops into their head always correlates to what they do now in terms of how they either work with people, they don't work with people, things they've learned about they like and things they don't learn like what they like. And I think having an incredible career in culture, like having those initial first understanding of what it means to produce something massive of all different types of moving parts, but also understanding the personalities that go with it, correlates to a lot of the stuff that I'm sure that you do now.
Very much so. Very much so. The lessons I learned at 17 years old, I'm still using today. And I was unbelievably lucky in that I had a mentor from day one who was the production director of Reading. And talk about, I literally would not be here today living in LA doing what I'm doing without her guidance. She really brought me into the world almost kind of fully formed because she was so on the ball. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was so well respected, and I was her apprentice. So I got the most extraordinary on-the-job education from the start, and I will always be thankful to her for that.
Awesome. So let's talk about that. So you're 17 years old, you start out at the Reading Festival, and then how do we end up having a conversation now, about 30 years later? Like, what's that journey been like? What have you been up to?
It's been a wild and woolly journey, but worth the ride for sure. I mean, I stayed in the festival scene for many years in the UK, not only as the festival grew, not just Reading, but there were multiple other festivals that I was involved in. and then stayed in the music industry, but moved to Australia for what I thought was going to be a short working holiday. And about 2 weeks after I arrived in Australia, I got the call from a promoter there who wanted to start the Asia Pacific's version of South by Southwest. So I was the
Whoa.
organizer of that. Yeah, it was called Pacific Circle Music. And it ran for 4 years, and same kind of programming deal as you'd see at South by Southwest. South by Southwest, there was showcases, there was masterclasses, there was conferences, there were panels. So again, I had this kind of baptism of fire into the Asia Pacific entertainment industry, because I was working with record companies and associations, managers, agents, you name it. And then again, also working very closely with talent. From there, I took a little bit of a sidestep into what was then the birth of the internet. And this is way back when there was an mp3.com, when there was a Napster, when there was a Live Lounge.
Those days.
Yeah. Way before MySpace even. That's how old or how young the internet was at that point. But again, crash course in the digital world, working specifically with publishers. And I decided to stay in that for a little while, but because I'd done so much work in the experiential industry, I found myself going back to my roots, as it were, but working with a huge event production company, which basically owns the contracts to do events in most of the 4- and 5-star hotels in the Asia Pacific region. And they were called the Stage and Connections Group. And that took me all over Asia Pacific, working with Tourism Australia, and many other kind of convention and meeting bureaus, in selling Australia as a viable destination for all kinds of events, conferences, conventions, festivals. We even, pitched a huge event with the China market for, what is it called, Amway products, which was the
Oh
biggest.
my gosh, really?
It was the biggest event ever to happen in Australia, and it was something like
Wow.
40,000 people came in over the space of about a month and a half. So yeah, that was extraordinary, but it really was an eye-opener for me in my cultural expertise, because it opened me up to how to work with Asian markets, what a banquet is, how to present a business card, the importance of gifting, and the key phrases to know as an English person in business, so that you kind of announce yourself with presence and authority, but you're culturally respectful of the people that you're doing business with. So that was a fascinating period of my life. And then I went into agency world, and I was working very much at the intersection between experiential and digital, but always with a cultural take. So I did freelancing, I did contracting, I really kind of moved around a lot of different agencies in Australia, trying to find my home. And as someone who's so focused on cultural intelligence, cultural relevance, I really didn't find my place at all. But I learned a lot in the doing, which is, how not to run an agency. And
very important skill to learn as
yes,
early as possible.
yeah, and what a toxic environment looks like and how to navigate that. But also how to really kind of carve out a place for myself, and whether I was right for that project or that agency or not. It really helped in kind of shaping me and my specific area of expertise. And where that led me to was working with a small agency who at the time were a little experiential shop in Sydney, and they're known as the Projects, which in Australia, the Projects has a very different meaning to what it means over here in the US. And projects being that the business did project after project after project. And they were very, very well versed in doing parties, and at the beginning of the influencer industry, and for those of you listening, you probably remember all of those rash of influencer dinner parties that happened at the beginning of you know, what's now called the influencer industry.
Oh yes, I did a lot of those.
Yes, indeed. That was the thing du jour when they're, you know, this is before any big platforms, any competitive platforms. This is just kind of how to get influencers on your side. And through that, I did a couple of very big projects, one of which was for Mercedes-Benz, where I built them a function space, a modular function space called the Temporium, which went on the road with them over multiple festivals, and really for the Australian market kind of changed the way that people look at how to design something when they're sponsoring a festival. And rather than putting up crappy, you know, pop-up banners, which are the bane of my existence.
Same. Oh,
And lots of branded signage and all the rest of it, really built something that was a bit of an architectural marvel, even though it was modular. And funnily enough, my inspiration for it, which I didn't tell Mercedes at the time, but my inspiration for it was the hatch from Lost, which I was just telling Laura I'm watching again. So that was my design inspiration.
oh, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
That was a landmark activation for me. And then I also worked on a huge music campaign with a brand called V, which is the second biggest energy drink in the Australian, New Zealand market after Red Bull. And they really wanted to get into the world of EDM. And I built a platform for them, which was similar to my background. So it was masterclasses. It was one-on-one kind of focus groups for aspiring DJs and musicians within the EDM world. It was a dance party series. We did a lot of different club nights with them. It was kind of anything that kind of touches EDM, we built this platform around, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. And I had one of the best clients in the world working with me at the time, who'd come from a similar background in Scotland. So we were just kind of joined at the hip from day one, say that. And working with projects in Australia, they were interested in opening up other offices, and they opened up an office in LA. And bit of a side turn to my story here, but strangely enough, I did part of my university degree at Eau Claire, University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire.
Wow.
A huge amount of time in Minneapolis, which is a place, a spiritual home for me, because I am the world's biggest Prince fan.
Really?
Yes, yes, indeed.
That's interesting. I'm a long suffering Mets fan, so
Okay.
I can I understand.
Yeah, but going to college in the States, I'd always planned to come back here and hopefully end up in Minneapolis again sometime. But took a bit of a detour and ended up in LA. And I've been here for 5 years now, and done a lot of really interesting work. I built a social entrepreneurship event series for the whiskey brand Chivas, which is called The Venture, which is still going today. Built a program for Vanity Fair called the Vanity Fair Social Club. And this is all around giving bloggers, Instagrammers, tweeters, YouTubers a place to kind of file their content while Vanity Fair is doing all of its Oscar parties and all of that kind of stuff. And then one of the proudest achievements of my career was working very closely with will.i.am, who was launching his headphone product, which is called Buttons. That was 3 or 4 years ago, and really got to work directly with him and his team on building what a cultural brand looks like. And he was a very smart operator, is a smart operator, in that he got Kendall Jenner, Naomi Campbell, and Andre Leon Talley as ambassadors for his brand. So I worked with them as well, which was amazing, particularly Andre. I mean, legendary.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Legendary. And that was a big benchmark as well, which led me to a little brand called Target, Um,
tiny little startup.
DTC, little brand.
Hmm.
But they came knocking, looking for new, fresh agencies who were operating in the influencer world. And we pitched against, I think it was 25 different agencies, and we won the day. We won that piece of business because we were small, focused. You know, the cultural relevance thing was exactly on the money for what they were looking for at the time. And also the fact that I went to college in Eau Claire and know Minneapolis like the back of my hand, that helped.
Helped. I'm gonna guess that definitely helped.
So what I do now, and I've been working with Target for 3 years as my principal client, is really look after the influencer side of their business, and have built a program for them after working with over 200 different creators in the first 2 years. We were always looking for, okay, who are the people that we really love working with and who we think we can do a long-term partnership with rather than just kind of a transaction. And from that was born a thing called Target Talent, which at the moment is 7 different creators, including Elaine Welteroth, who was the first Black editor of Teen Vogue, and Bobby Burke from Queer Eye. And then there are a few other creators who are very much kind of digital natives and have built their own followings on multiple platforms. And what we do with them is we have a look at what Target's prioritizing in their business calendar, and then we work with them to create organic stories for social media that speak to that business priority, but more importantly, speak to that creator's audience and what the audience is interested in. So it's a fascinating program. It's very fast moving, but as Laura was saying at the beginning, where I started my career, you know, absolutely set me up for where I am now. I am working with talent every day. I'm helping
See?
them to perform. I am helping them to create stories and a relationship with their audience. And I'm involved to a lesser extent these days, but I am involved in overseeing what goes on behind the scenes, in terms of what it takes to put posts together, what it takes to put a crossover moment together, and working up to, you know, I'll use the word supergroup, because we often do activations with the creators where we bring everybody together. So again, it's just very much at home for me working in this world. It's just not on a live stage. It's in the digital and social media arena. So it really has come full circle for me, but on a level that I couldn't have imagined when I was 17. So yeah, that's the story.
It's a very simple, non-eventful, quite linear story, Nick. I
Yeah,
mean, come on.
yeah.
Who needs twists and turns when you like, I started a job and I just stayed there for 30 years and nothing ever changed. It was just me filing paper from one part of the desk to the other part of the desk.
That's right.
Uh
That's not
no,
for
that's why, I mean, one, as I said to you, I think the first time I talked about I want to be you when I grow up, because because you're like the grown-up version of what I want to do.
oh,
Um, well, but also because I feel that it's, and why I wanted to have you on the show is that like you've seen what this world looks like. And I think, especially when it comes to culture and cultural marketing, that right now there is this rush to sort of find experts who you think can tell you the things. But it's really about the people who knew what this world would look like before there was Google, that
yes.
are so very important. So this moment isn't just a moment, but it's an actual movement. And
Yes.
including those voices like yours, which, yeah, so you're a white lady from England. Okay, cool. But you've seen some things. You have lived. And so you get it more than most. And I think your voice is so important at this particular moment.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate that, because I'm really passionate about advocating for my generation. I'm Generation X. When it was our heyday, so to speak, in the 90s, we were called the slacker generation. But interesting that the generation that was called the slackers, people within my generation include J.J. Abrams, for example. Um, a lot of different Prince is in my generation. Just multi-talented people. And from a marketing side, we were doing marketing before there was any social media, before there was any internet. You know, we learned how to do things in a very, what's called in the UK, spit and sawdust way, where you had, you know, zero budget and all you had were tools like flyers and posters and, you know, ads in music magazines, radio shows, and none of it digitally connected, none of it kind of globally connected, but we made it work. And in terms of the creativity and the experiential side, again, you know, we made things work when we had, you know, pretty basic technology to work with, other than sound and vision, you know. And I think that's so important while people are looking for cultural expertise and looking for cultural consultancy, because if you're only going to the millennials and the Gen Z, you're not getting the full picture. And what I find incredibly frustrating is when I see all these insight reports, which are coming at things and coming at culture from a millennial and Gen Z point of view, which is absolutely fair enough. They have a voice, it's an important one. But there's actually no cultural context or history being applied. And there's certainly not any shout out for originators who were doing this stuff a long time ago. And, you know, it's an off-level criticism at millennials is that they take something that Gen X invented and they claim it for their own. That's actually a truism, because there are so many things, like drag has become a pop culture phenomenon in the last 4 or 5 years, on a mass basis, on a global basis, thanks to RuPaul's Drag Race. But what of all the originators? You know, this is an art form that has actually been around since the 1700s. You know, Pride was started with a riot at Stonewall in New York, and it was started by a drag queen. And there have been so many icons in the art form that are still so important and so culturally vibrant. And the newer generation themselves and within the industry really do look up to and respect these people. But as far as the mass phenomenon, those voices have been lost. And it's about the latest, greatest thing that's on Instagram. And I guess where I'm coming from now after 30 years is, yes, there's amazing stuff happening at the moment. And I'm just using drag as an example. But you've got to look deeper than that. You've got to look at the history. You've got to look at the icons that actually contributed to the birth of the art form and where it came from. If you truly want to have an understanding, and if you truly want to be part of the community, you've got to know your history. You have to do your homework. And that's hopefully what I'm bringing to the table now in the work that I'm doing. Because in my off time, you know, when I'm not working for Target, this is all the work I'm doing, is really help people find what that cultural compass is and give them the surrounding context so it all makes sense. So they're just not jumping into something and bandwagon jumping or appropriating, because that's the worst thing you could do. That's sin number one. Original sin in culture is appropriating.
This is something that's so true, because I think what I think often happens right now is that because people just Google, they assume that that's where all the answers are.
Yep.
And it's like you're Gen X, so but I am a Zennial. So I was born in the early 80s.
Right.
So we're the squeeze generation, because I think it's 77 to 85. Okay. Because we went to college with computers, we went to high school with computers, kind of elementary school, but we know what dial-up was. We remember what it meant to like crack open a book, and go read something, and then have to have a critical eye as to what you're reading so that you understand and comprehend something. And that's missing from a lot of these conversations, because, you know, I make this joke that I'm kind of an old soul, because, like, you know, my parents were older when they had me. So like I listened to music from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Right. And so like that filled my brain. And so when I think about like what the world was like when that music was being made, I look at it as with awe and be like, you have to respect that. And you have to see how that colors where we are right now. There is no pose without Paris is Burning,
Right.
you know, but also understanding that the world was drastically different when Paris is Burning was coming out versus where we are in 2020 when Pose is a phenomenon. Like, and you know, oftentimes giving people a little bit of grace and understanding as to why they may not have come out of class at that particular time, because you couldn't do it in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You can totally do that when you're an elementary school kid now, but like the world was different then. I think oftentimes when we're thinking about culture, is that like the folks are not understanding that you can do this stuff now because someone has to crawl over glass to get
Correct.
that door open ajar for you to sprint through. And
Absolutely.
and rather than sprinting through that door and slamming it behind the Gen X folks or even the boomers to a degree who were there before you, keep the freaking door open and
Right.
invite us all into this conversation. Because if we have this very twisted view of like it's only the young will save us all, then we're not going to get saved.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. And I think you articulated that so perfectly, Laura, because any form of culture, and you know, my kind of twin loves in my life have been drag and hip hop, and it's the same thing. You would not have Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion if you didn't have Roxanne Shante and MC Light, you know, and Salt
precisely.
Pepper and Latifah. You know, you've got to open your aperture much wider to really understand the art form and the culture that you're dealing with. And there's a brilliant example recently talking about hip hop, because there's a documentary that's came out on Netflix about Misa Hilton. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
style maker who is responsible for
Everything,
everything,
everything.
everything, any iconic image of a black performer in the last, let's call it 30 years.
It was her.
There are two people. There's Dapper Dan and there's Misa Hilton. And Misa Hilton had kind of been completely forgotten by history and her contribution. And they've just done this documentary on her, which it made me cry, because finally she is getting the recognition that she deserves, and her contribution to the black music industry and to the style industry, quite frankly, is absolutely astonishing. And I think that's such a great example to look at and say, look, there's someone that was, you know, a voice that we didn't heard, who is she is a true influencer in my understanding of what an influencer is that you don't need to have a huge social media following to be that influential. And she still doesn't have a huge
Still,
on social media. It's gotten better, but it ain't huge.
it ain't huge. But look, she like every look, every look. I mean, I think of Megan Thee Stallion, and I'm like, there you go. Like,
Yeah.
there's the direct line. But even so much, like, you know, watching the Versus duels has been an awakening for a lot of people, not realizing where this music came from. Like when there was Teddy Riley and Babyface, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. I was fascinated because you know, last week there was Brandy versus Monica.
Yep.
And if you're a brand, and if someone has said to you, we want to do a live stream where Brandy and Monica will do just play their hits, they may intersperse a couple of stories on Instagram Live. I'm wondering which brand would have said yes to that.
Right.
And
Exactly.
then, but then to see these 6 million people who watched that live, separate of the replays. Like I was on, it's a perfect example. I was on Apple Music watching it on my TV, but had it streaming on my phone so I could see the comments and switching back from Instagram to Twitter to be in the conversation on both sides of that house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's how, you know, because that was the music that I was listening to on the bus going to elementary school.
Right. Right.
And you think of like all these young, really great performers right now. Like again, this doesn't happen unless these women were doing it. And I think when Monica said she was like 12 years old when she like did a song, we were like, how old were you?
Right.
But like how the world has changed, where it's like you think of these sort of manufactured stars that come out of a reality show and then are turned into a music artist. And you're like, no, these were like girls who were found at the mall who could, because they did a singing competition.
Yep.
And then it was their raw talent, but also right time, right place,
Mm-hmm.
to use that talent, that fueled an engine of music that gets you to where we are right now. And that's the thing that I think that's so fascinating about, culture. Um, because if we don't take this holistic view and understand that it doesn't start with Instagram, and it doesn't start with a tweet or you going viral in a reality show, but like all the time in the music beforehand, that stuff is where this all comes from, and you've got to include that, when understanding why we're at this very interesting cultural clash moment, and whether or not what will happen as a result of it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that holistic understanding and marrying the two worlds, and yeah, Brandy and Monica was a great example. Another great example is DJ Cassidy did this series, I think he's still doing it, called Pass the Mic, where he is bringing together icons of the R&B and the hip hop scene, and doing just little intercuts of their most famous tracks. And these things are extraordinary to watch. They're on YouTube. It's Ray Cassidy, Pass the Mic, Volume 1, Volume 2. And you've got, I mean, the funk one is incredible. You've got Earth, Wind and Fire. You've got a lot of artists from that generation of the 70s and early 80s. The hip hop one has got everyone from Run DMC to LL Cool J to MC Light. I mean, it's just incredible. And where technology has advanced that, unbelievable, like it's an embarrassment of riches, the amount of talent that he's been able to bring together, is that he's done it like a Zoom call. And again, amplified voices from artists that some people may never have heard of, but they certainly may not have heard that these people were actually the creators of the funk scene and the creators of hip hop and the creators of a certain style, a look, an ethos, a way of coming at the world. And I think it's so important that those things continue and they don't get commercialized too much, because then they lose their yes, they may have mass appeal, but with going too commercial obviously brings with it compromises, and I think we're still in the state of the world, unfortunately, and what's happening now in influencer land, which I'll be very clear and say I absolutely hate, is all of these hype houses in the LA hills,
Oh, I hate.
filled
Oh,
with privileged white kids making fluff content, and they're already talking about 4, not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 different reality shows that are going to be based on what's happening with these privileged kids in their LA mansions. Does the world really need that right now?
well, that's the thing. That's the thing that blows my mind. And there was a Hype House video that I saw yesterday. Like someone, I think it's called Honey. I think it's called Honey House.
Right.
And the guy literally, it was like 7 white people who were clearly models. And one was a meditation guru, one was a fitness person. And I was like, this is literally making my brain melt. Like, what? Who do you think is paying attention to this right now? But then who's greenlighting it? And
Yep.
and who's going ahead with it? But it's interesting. Like the flip side of this is I just read that the guy who made like the kind of dark version of Fresh Prince called Bel Air, which was basically a reboot but in modern times and it become a drama, just got signed to Peacock for a 2-season run off of the pitch.
Right.
And that to me is an interesting side of the universe, because that's the kind of content that you're taking something that was originally a comedy, adjusting it for modern times, but also putting it in the context of where we are right now. When I see these stupid hype houses, I'm like, you do see that there are protests in the street over Black people getting killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you in the Hollywood Hills, drinking kombucha is not that interesting.
No.
At all. I mean, I just saw that the Kardashians is jumping off a cliff now, and they're like, all right, we're done. And the last season is going to be in the beginning of 2021, and then they're done. Even they're getting that, like, this.
Yeah.
Is not for it's not for the masses anymore. And how do we get brands to get a clue and be like, you need to embrace content that is diverse, not just in racially diverse, but age diverse and
Mhm.
experience diverse and location diverse.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, then you get 4 reality shows that look like those hype houses, and all you do is make rich white kids even richer, and that's about it.
Yep. Couldn't agree more, Laura. Couldn't agree. And that's why it's so encouraging to see, and certainly over the last 6, 12 months, shows like Black Lady Sketch Show and We're Here on HBO, and the documentary Disclosure about trans portrayal in media, is that these things are not only getting signed and greenlit, but they're also up for awards. Pose is still an interesting one to me, that not a single trans member of that cast has been nominated for an Emmy. That is just such a hugely telling
Very
statement,
telling.
apart from Janet Mock, but none of the lead actresses are nominated. But you are seeing, We're Here, which is about 3 drag queens going into rural areas and spreading the message of drag, that is nominated for I think 3, maybe 4 different awards. Queer Eye is up for 7 different awards. So it's, the journey continues, but none of us who are invested in culture and who are advocates for diverse culture can rest on our laurels, because we've got a long way to go. As long as the industry of putting a lot of white kids in a room so they can argue with each other for our entertainment, as long as that still continues, and it's only rising at the moment. Everyone wants a piece of a hype house at the moment, because everybody's looking for, guess what, cultural history, The Real World, which was a show that MTV aired in the early 90s.
Early 90s is when I started.
Yep. And Next Top Model, which was, apart from the modeling, was a lot of girls in a house arguing with each other. It's like the appetite for manufactured drama is the thing that, me as someone who works in the cultural industry, that I have a laser focus on dismantling, because it does nobody any good. That sure, there are people making money hand over fist behind the scenes who are producing these things, but what are they producing? Ricky Gervais, of all people, put it brilliantly on one of the last episodes of Extras, in that the Victorian freak show never went away. We wheel out these people to laugh at them, while a producer, or a host makes tons of money by humiliating people. Like, surely, after this year, we have got to be able to move to a world where that kind of content and that kind of culture is just not acceptable, because it is detrimental not only to the people involved and their mental health, but the people watching and their mental health. And, let's not, there's no two ways about it. As well as the global pandemic of COVID, we are in the middle of a pandemic of mental health crisis. And culture is, I'll make a big statement here. Culture is something that can heal the world if we look at it in the right way, if we present it in the right way, and we show it as a means to betterment, whether that's education, whether that's enlightenment, whether that's inspiring people. Surely that's got to be the path forward in the media world that we live in. And I think until more diverse people, and not just diverse, but courageous people get a seat at the table, or if they are sitting at the table, that they actually find their voice. Because I find this a lot, that there are actually very passionate, very committed people working behind the scenes and trying to change things so that they can be more culturally relevant and more respectful of culture. But they have been drowned out by so many years of being told that's not important right now, because what's important is, the dollar that we need to make on this particular transaction. And they've just gotten used to it. And I count myself amongst this group, is that there's been times over my career where I've really felt that my voice didn't matter. and that nobody was listening to my point of view, because all that mattered was the commercial outcome of something. And to me, I've made a commitment to myself, is that I can't allow that to happen anymore, because, you know, I'm influential in what I do. I've got a vast network that I've built up over the years. And also, you know, we are moving into a new world, and whether you like it or not, it is happening. And with that massive paradigm change has got to come with it more compassion, less toleration for just bullshit. And reality shows in my world are bullshit. And making time to expose yourself to things that you may be uncomfortable with to start off with. But you've got to broaden your mind when it comes to culture, because it's criminal to do anything else in my book. And if you don't understand lots of different cultures, whether you are a fan or not, but cultural education is also, for me, a means by which we can get over some of the problems that we're having. You know, all of the horrendous Karen videos that I've seen on Instagram.
Oh God.
I don't know if it's a fruitless task, but if they had any form of cultural education, you know, if they were able to open their eyes to anything else but a doom scroll of bullshit about Trump and what the latest reality show star, who they're sleeping with, if they diverted their attention from that into anything cultural, I think we'd have so less of the problems we're experiencing today. And that may be a completely idealistic, utopian viewpoint, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to own it and say, this is something that I really believe in, because, you know, what we've been fed over the last 10, 15 years, particularly, has made us dumber as a
Yes.
society. I'm on
It
my
really has.
now, Laura, but
No, and you should be comfortable there, because it's where you rightly should be. You know, I agree with everything you said. It's like, remember I said I want to be you when I grow up, because you literally live inside my brain. But I think you're just right. I mean, you know, one of the things that like irritated me so much to no end was I watched $1 Million Beach House without reading, because I didn't, on Netflix, because I love real estate shows, like, you know, $1 Million Listing, New York, LA, or my fun, because it's like, you know, I love real estate, and it's like a nice little escape. So I assumed I'd be watching something similar, and like, oh great, it's Netflix, it'll be even cooler. And I have to say, I was like, who on God's green earth at Netflix thought this show in August of 2020 was a good idea to
right,
put on air? Like,
right,
that should have been on a shelf somewhere, and maybe
yep,
we'll put that out. Never. Because my first thought was, okay, so this is a reality show that was filmed 6 years ago, right? Because
yep,
they literally are setting up the black guy to be the fall guy for everything, and to have the Karen-esque character make his life a living hell. Like,
mm-hmm.
you're not gonna really put that on national television in the middle of racial unrest in this country, when there are Karen videos where people are trying to call people, the cops on folks, still literally have them get arrested or killed. But then there it was. And so, and even with Netflix, you would assume that, and we know that there are folks in the room who are diverse, who can speak up, but like, that show went to air.
Yep,
And it literally was like, this is a 6-year-old reality show. Like, we don't do this anymore with reality shows. Like, if there's one black person, he's not the bad guy with the hard to pronounce the first name. Like, but there you were. So,
mm-hmm.
you know, it's very much having people who are, you know, and this is where I'm going to throw the ad in for culture boards, but like, it's very much having people who are not in the bubble, who are looking at this stuff ahead of time before it actually hits the shores. Because you've got to realize that, like, we're at this very interesting intersection, where it's not just about making sure that we don't, you know, tick off a particular group, but like, for the betterment of our world, we've got to see more images that show different cultures in a positive light. It's part of the reason why, like, you know, I'm working on some whole things around Black joy because like you have to show that side of the universe, and there is so much to show. The reason why D Nice became the thing that saved people in March was because he's an amazing DJ that can keep going for 9 hours, and whether you're black, white, didn't like, you could listen to that music and it would took you away, and you forgot you were locked in your house and you didn't feel that you weren't welcome to those conversations. And that was
Absolutely.
because organically you start with humanity, you are authentic to who you are, you're inclusive, but you're also good at what you do. And I think the good at what you do piece is so very important. Like, are you finding people who are fantastic at what they do, or are you just finding people who have high Instagram followings? I think that's the first problem here.
Yep.
Because if you go with the best of what you do, the people will follow. Like, you got 6 million people watching Brandy and Monica who are in their early 40s because they knew hearing those voices would take them away from being stuck inside, and would give them moments of joy to laugh and make jokes and be a part of something that wasn't about the pandemic. And so
Mhm.
as we create these narratives and these stories, like, that is so necessary right now in order for us to get cultural marketing right.
Absolutely. And as you say, it's people who commission these shows or commission the advertising campaign or the influencer campaign. They are in a bubble, particularly if you work in a brand. You're given your lane, and you have to focus on it relentlessly. And I appreciate people who work in those scenarios, but that's what you and I are here for, Laura, as you say, is to step out. We're not in the bubble, we're in the world. And giving that objective opinion and that objective advice about, you may want to think about that $1 Million Beach House show because of these different reasons. And it's as much as an emotional argument as it is a expert.
Dollars and cents. One moment. It's like,
Yeah,
what does it
absolutely.
cost you when people are ticked off? Just think about
Correct.
that.
Correct. And it's funny because I was thinking about this just this morning. Is the people that say, "Oh, but it's a guilty pleasure." Do you should feel guilty because there are better things you could be doing with your time, more productive things, and exposing yourself to more enriching content. And I think that phrase, "Oh, it's my guilty pleasure," I mean, that's one that I hope to see kind of exorcised from our language, because content, shows, all of these things, they're meant to uplift us, to entertain us, to educate us, to inform us, and just appealing to our baser instincts. That's the way things have gone, in a capitalist system. When it's just about getting as many viewers as possible to watch someone embarrassing themselves. I think the advent of that kind of reality TV, particularly the Kardashians, was for me the biggest indicator of this is a society that has gone seriously wrong. Serious. Um, when
So right.
yeah, um,
But it's interesting. It's also how we got our current president. Because what was he before he was president?
it was a reality TV show.
Think about it. Like, it's literally what I mean. What did he do? He humiliated people who he thought were losers on TV. And what did he also do? He appealed to our basest nature. I want to watch someone get fired by a rich white dude.
Yep.
Like, and that was on for what, 8 seasons, 9 seasons?
And this is what I'm
And
saying is that the old Cheeto face is the apex, the the big inflection point, is that's where it got to, is that kind of attitude and that kind of way of looking at the world got a man elected to the presidency of the United States, the same country that had Lincoln as a president, Kennedy. It's just mind-boggling to me. But then again, it isn't, because that's the way we've been heading, because culture dominates so much of what we take in, and how we form our impressions about the world, that even though it keeps me awake at night knowing that there are people, that 40% of this country thinks that this is a good president.
oh, don't
I mean,
remind me.
where did that impression come from? And it comes from, we've kind of made this podcast a diatribe against reality TV, Laura, but that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
But yeah, that was, it's crazy, but it's not, that we've ended up in, and it's in our hands to reverse that. It really is in our hands, and everybody can get something out of it. It may not be the perfect solution in 2020, but at least we've got to swing the pendulum back the other way.
We have to. I mean, look, I think that we don't have a choice, because one, we're inside, so that's not changing anytime soon. So we have to make the choice to do the work to actually look deeper, because there's no other way we can escape this all.
Correct.
But also for the better of it all. It's the images that we see matter. It just is. And I think that's the thing that needs to be like pounded through everyone's brain about this, is that when you saw in the 70s Archie Bunker,
Mm-hmm.
and then you saw the Jeffersons,
Mm-hmm.
like that said to a generation of people, yeah, you could have a racist white neighbor, but then you can also have this upwardly mobile Black family. And there was something about seeing that unlocked another generation of awareness, where kids were like, oh, I can totally move on up. And then you got the Cosby Show. And it's like, look, two working parents, their kids driving them crazy. Everyone could relate to that. And then you had the Fresh Prince, and then you had Girlfriends, and then you had Martin, and you had Living Single. And then we got to reality TV. And I think that's where like the shift went, where it's like, oh, instead of it being like, we're all kind of the same, we live the similar kinds of life, we all have those quirky things that happen to us, but then this sort of not reality, but reality TV spawned this whole new generation whereby like being mean, not, trying to find ways to make people's lives miserable because that's what you thought people needed to see was the switch. And so how do we get back to like just being normal? Like, we're all stuck together now because of this pandemic. What kind of stories can you tell, Hello Brands, about just being normal?
Correct.
And good and kind and having empathy.
Yep.
Because if you do that, that's when we start to see real, meaningful and lasting change. Because I think lots of folks are trying to, I want to solve a problem right now, it's gonna be done. I'm like, it's gonna have to be a long-term project. Like, because we're in this world of instant gratification, everyone thinks that you solve racism in 90 seconds or in 22 minutes if it's a reality show. And it's like, no, like you're gonna need a lot longer time for this to actually come together for real. And that's how we'll actually be able to be smarter about this.
Completely. And you've really hit on the core of where I come from in my work, which is a science called semiotics. And for those of you listening who aren't familiar with the term, semiotics is the science of studying signs, symbols, images, icons, logos, and anything that's kind of in visual or in written or verbal form, to look for the real meaning of what's being communicated there. So when you see, and I don't think reality shows are very good at this at all. In fact, they go the other way. But, when you see Billy Porter on the red carpet in a tux, but then with a big voluminous skirt, the semiotics of what he's doing by wearing that outfit is saying, hey, I am an out, proud, gay Black man who likes to experiment with female clothing and expressing my feminine side. And you can't tell me nothing, because this is how I'm going to present myself to the world. I think he is a current master of it. And this is the practice of semiotics is what, again, I hope, and I know, Laura, you're very involved in this work as well, is bringing to brands and saying, you have to think about every single thing you are communicating, every word that you use, or don't use, every element of the image that you're putting together, because people are way smarter than we give them credit for. And at this time in our lives, at this point in history, where people are so aware now, more than they ever have been, about the disgraceful disparities in our society, they will pick up on things and you will be taken to task for them. And if you put out a bullshit message about, yeah, we're diverse and inclusive and we're culturally aware, but then what you're actually putting out into the world in your advertising clearly isn't, then you must expect to be publicly taken apart for it. And cancel culture, whatever you want to call it. But I think the big shift that I'm glad is happening now is people really taking brands to task for their previous activity and their current activity, and saying you can't stay silent and just sell us stuff anymore. We look to you, brands, to help us inform, our identity and the decisions we make about what we spend our money on. And if all you're chucking at me is, here is yet another expensive doodad that I neither need nor can afford, then what good are you in my life, brand? What relevance do you have to my life? And I think that's what everybody's searching for, is a reflection of their identity, to be seen and heard, truly seen and heard in what happens in the marketing sphere, and to be able to speak truth to power, to talk back and say, I didn't appreciate this thing that you did, X brand, because one of the images that you used in that carousel or whatever it might be really offended me because you didn't do your homework. And that's been proven with terrifying clarity all over Diet Prada in recent months.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Particularly that Vogue cover of I think it was LeBron and a supermodel.
Oh, Kate Upton, where he was a gorilla.
Exactly. I mean, wow. And the people who are behind the scenes of those shoots and they know what they're doing. These are people in the cultural industries. And we've got to all be held to a higher standard and put out something that has meaning for people and isn't just waffle. There's too much waffle. So yeah, I think I wasn't optimistic when we began this quarantine and these lockdowns and all the rest of it. And I still have, the jury's out a little bit because things are not moving as fast as I would like them to. And, it's because the people in power at the top are still predominantly straight, white, cis men who've had it their own way for a very long time. And who would want to change? When you're making a bunch of money and you're calling all the shots and you commission things that reflect what you want to see and not what society wants to see. That's a very hard thing for people to give up, but it takes people like you, Laura, like me, and anyone else who's working on senior levels that has the opportunity to speak to CMOs and CEOs and founders of businesses to say, you've got to get out your own way now. Like, you've had your time, you've made a bunch of money, and it's now time for other voices to come through. And it will be, it will be relevant, and it will be financially viable, and it will be better for your staff, and it will be better for your company. Like, it's a win-win all round. Studies prove that the more culturally diverse you have in the boardroom, in the office, in the workroom, wherever it is, the better your business will succeed. And the same goes for advertising. This is why back in the 80s again, why Benetton were the massive success that they were, because they came out of the gate with united colours of Benetton. And this
from the beginning.
From the beginning. Yeah. So, I think we have an incredible nexus of opportunity here between a lot of Gen X practitioners who know how to market on a dime and without technology. We have a lot of people in the marketing game who have unfortunately lost their jobs due to cutbacks and whatnot. So there's lots of great talent out there. There is this opportunity in time to change the game once and for all. And there is this also this amazing opportunity that the future is fluid. You know, who knows what's going to get thrown at us in the weeks to come, in the months to come. We've got to be constantly adapting. That is cultural evolution. That is evolution itself. And my hope is that more and more people, and this is why it's been such a pleasure to meet you, Laura, and to talk to you, is that the more I search for like-minded people out there in the world, the more I'm finding them. And there is true strength.
Likewise.
There is strength and power in numbers. And the more we, as an industry, as professionals, as experts, can come together and all collectively say, this has to change now. And cultural relevance should be number one on your list. Number one on your list for the foreseeable future. Not a side committee that has a meeting once a month and then just sends a report into the board. Not some kind of tokenistic effort of D&I, diversity inclusion efforts. That there is cultural relevance and the appreciation of cultural sensitivities in everything that you're doing as a brand should be priority number one, and should get the funding it deserves and get the experts who can really help you as a brand move your business forward and move your brand forward in a way that people will really respect. That's got to start now. There's a couple of brands that are doing it, but it hasn't quite taken on, you know, the speed that I would have hoped it to take on by now. We've got a lot of work to do. These are very big established systems and corporations that we're dealing with. But again, I call on anyone listening to this podcast, like, get in contact with me, get in contact with Laura, because this is the work we're doing on the front lines of cultural marketing right now. It's trying to change the game.
It's so necessary.
It's so necessary. And we can't do
Oh
it.
my gosh.
We can't do it alone. I'm just one person. Laura's just one person, you know. We need like-minded people because the more
Who get it.
The more we can form a movement of this thing and get that movement moving even quicker, then the more people will take notice of it. And that's why I'm fully supportive of culture boards and any cultural collective that is trying to change the game at the moment. Yeah, I am here for it. I am here for you. You're not alone. There are people like me and Laura who care deeply about the work that you're doing. So, you know, let's connect. I mean, that has been the amazing thing about this terrible time that we're living in, is the opportunity to connect. And yeah, Zoom calls all day, every day can be absolutely exhausting. We're all experiencing that. But there is this opportunity to reach out people that you never thought you would have contacted.
Ever find. Right.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how many like-minded people out there. It's been the thing that's kept me going, is to meet so many new people through networking, through LinkedIn, through conferences online, that I'm like, this is how Laura and I met. I loved what she had to say for the 3% conference, and I contacted directly on LinkedIn, and we sparked up a conversation, and here we are now doing a podcast. It can all happen very naturally and very quickly. And that's the kind of change I want to see in the world.
Here. As I said, I want to be you when I grow up. But you know, for all the work that you're doing is so desperately important. What are you, Nic, doing for your self-care? Because it's a lot now.
It's a lot. It is a lot. That's a great question, Laura. So because of what's going on and all the terribleness in the world, I've been struggling with massive insomnia. And what I'm doing for my self-care routine is firstly sleep hygiene. So making sure I eat at a certain time, making sure I'm taking a beat and just resting my brain during the day. And then when I get into the evening, making sure again that I'm eating at the right time and I'm going to bed consistently at the same time. So I give my body clock, you know, clear signals of what I'm doing. And other than that, a couple of other things I've been doing recently is one, I've been doing a couple of little art projects where I'm turning off my phone, I'm turning off my laptop, and all I'm doing is just kind of creating. And that could be a collage, it could be a painting, it could be working with photography, where I'm just in the act of creation. And I don't have a commercial outcome, I don't have a social media outcome, I'm just doing it for the sense of creating. And then the final thing, which is a weird one, I I started doing a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know what exactly inspired it, but because of because of the insomnia that I suffer with, and learning to work with lavender essential oil as a natural relaxant, I've suddenly become fascinated in fragrance and the effect that a fragrance has on your mood. And I've been buying little sampler kits of perfumes and essential oils and all the rest of it, and actually noting down when I put one on my skin, like how it makes me feel, what time of the day it is. And it's amazing actually how different smells can inject energy into your day, lift you up when you're feeling a bit crap, and all of that. So aromatherapy is definitely become part of my self-care routine, along with sleep hygiene. And then I've gone completely vegan as well. So
Wow.
no junk food whatsoever. I'll have a little bit of fish, but other than that, 100% vegan. And what I've found is that it definitely helps with a depressed mood, or just feeling down about everything that you're seeing on the news and all the rest of it. But also that feeling of eating clean food and plant-based food is just, for me, my body is feeling different and my brain is certainly functioning better. And by removing all the junk, the caffeine, the sugar, and most other, you know, junky food stuff, everything you buy in the supermarket, basically all the boxed goods, it's had a pretty radical effect on how I'm thinking. Whereas at the beginning of quarantine, I was in such a terrible depression because of everything that was going on. And, you know, I have a bit of a tendency towards depression anyway. But changing my diet has had a fundamental impact. And it's not for everybody. Vegan is quite hard to do, and it does have some health risks associated with if you go too far with it. But I consider it very much part of my self-care routine. So sleep hygiene, fragrances, and veganism is my equation to self-care at the moment.
That's amazing. I'm with you on basically kind of all three. I mean, when I told you I just got back from vacation, and like the thing that I did on vacation was actually sleep. Like I
Right.
went to bed at 10:30 every day for 5 days.
Right.
And I feel better right now than I've probably felt in years.
Amazing.
So, and similar on the aromatherapy, like a friend of mine introduced me to like essential oils, similar at the beginning of quarantine. And I do a little lavender mist on the pillow. And fall
Yep.
asleep right away. But also like even just like, having some of the peppermint, or this is cocoa oil that's good to kind of help. It's like a cinnamon based, to sort of help ward off whatever potential cold or something. And like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And yeah, I did a vegan cleanse right before I went on vacation because I'm like, I'm gonna eat everything when I get on vacation. I lost 10 pounds in a week.
Wow.
I was like,
Oh,
okay.
lovely.
I was like, this cleanse is amazing. What? But I also think that I worked them every day. Like it was super manageable. And I had been before COVID, I had started doing like one plant-based meal a day
Mhm.
to like try it out to sort of slowly guide my way into it. But then COVID hit and I was like, never mind. But I definitely saw a difference because even when I went on vacation, I was pretty much eating clean the entire time because it was a healthy resort. And same deal, like you feel better. I think everything's in moderation to which you can withstand is the key for all this stuff. But yeah, just make the changes because this is madness. And so like you have to figure out ways to deal. Otherwise, oh my God, what will you do?
Exactly. Exactly. agree more.
And so last question for you, because I feel like I could talk to you forever. What's a give and or an ask that you like to put out to the audience?
Um, an ask that I'd like to put out to the audience is have a think about and write down some notes about what you feel you're a cultural expert on. What are the areas of culture that if you use the military term of drop and give me 20, what is the area of culture that I could, myself or Laura could come to you immediately and say, okay, tell me 20 things about X, whatever that culture is you're interested in, and find out, what really makes you tick culturally. It's an exercise I've been going through recently, and narrowing in on that expertise, and whether you're just a super fan or something. You don't have to be in the cultural marketing industry, but figuring out where you're expert in cultural relevance, I think, is a really, really useful exercise in terms of looking at all the things you don't know and what you'd like to learn. And I think it's a really important part of personal growth and development. Where am I culturally aware, and where am I not, and where would I like to learn? That's my ask.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, Nic. Okay, so you know that we could keep talking forever because it's just kismet. Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like you just dropped a master class of cultural wisdom for the last, I don't even know how long we've been talking now, almost an hour. But thank you so very much, because I think it was necessary, needed, and to the point of what folks need to understand in the work that we all do. So
Well,
thank you
thank
so
you so much
much.
for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. So I'll throw the notes in to contact Nic and reach out in
Yep.
our show notes. And I'll also post a question in the show notes so that folks can do the drop and give me 20 and figure out what things they are a cultural expert at. Because I always, similar to you, like if you write it down, you're amazed at what you actually put down on a piece of paper once
Exactly.
you actually think about it
It can be
and give it some thought.
yeah, it can be as much as an education as it can be a confidence booster to say, wow, I actually know a lot about that thing. So yeah, useful exercise. Thank you
Awesome.
so much, Laura.
Thanks so much, Nic. And that is our show.